what worked for their supervisor, what worked for their predecessors, will not work for them just because of how things are now. Tell people that you're looking and what you're looking for, because that automatically multiplies the number of people who are job hunting for you. If you've got a disability or a long-term health condition, I think what you have to be really good at doing is you have to be really good at understanding your boundaries and understanding what you need and being able to ask for it.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Today's guest, Holly Prescott, is one of the wonderful people who I didn't know before the podcast, but is now one of our biggest champions. Holly is a careers advisor at the University of Birmingham. She specialises in working with PhD students and postdocs, advising on both research and research adjacent careers, which explains her enthusiasm for the podcast. Thanks, Holly. Holly also writes regularly for Post-Gradual, her PhD careers blog, which provides a wealth of advice on things like identifying skills, redefining success and using LinkedIn. There's even a book version coming soon, which you'll hear about in this episode. In our conversation, we talk about why Holly found herself drawn to working in the research careers advice area, why specialists like her are in short supply, navigating life and work with a disability, and why she wants to find new language to describe the world of opportunities that are out there for graduates. Speaking of which, if you're listening to this podcast for career inspiration, then make sure you check out our podcast back catalogue. Take a minute to hit subscribe in your podcast app and then you'll have instant access to our growing archive of research adjacent career stories. In our conversation, Holly talks about the importance of role models. Well, we have got over 50 role models to choose from, and around half of them have got PhDs, so you're bound to find somebody whose story resonates with you. Then, without further ado, let's add Holly to that archive of inspiring role models. Listen on to hear her story. Welcome along to the podcast, Holly. Thank you so much for coming along as a guest. I wonder if we could start by just hearing a bit about what it is that you do.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. I am a fan of the podcast, so it's great to be talking to you. A little bit about what I do. I'll start with where I came from. I did a PhD, which I finished in 2011. It was kind of humanities, social sciencey sort of PhD. And since then, I have worked in what I would consider to be academic adjacent roles. So I went for a job in postgraduate student recruitment, where I was helping people to apply for postgraduate degrees. And I was going all around Europe, which was very exciting, doing exhibitions, convincing people they should come to University of Birmingham to do their postgrad. I got that job because when I was coming towards the end of my PhD, a friend sent it to me and said, "You'd be good at this." And I said, "Great, what is it?" But no, I'd worked with him helping out doing postgrad open days, and so knew the office a little bit. And I went for the interview. I didn't get the full-time job, but I got taken on part-time because the department had some extra funding. So tip number one, always go for interviews, because even if you don't get the job, you might get offered something else.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I worked there for about 3 years. And what I did as I was going through that was I kept thinking, what do I like about this? And everything there was, I like presenting, I like being student-facing, I like the advisory capacity. What I liked less about it was the salesy aspect. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a conversation with these people I'm talking to and put them and their needs at the centre rather than selling them a postgraduate course? And I thought, well, there's something that does that, isn't there? There's career guidance. And that's what then led me down this path. I was also always drawn back to the example that, well, the model really of my own careers advisor when I was doing my PhD, Lucy. She was a person I'd always looked at and thought, I could see myself doing what you do. And I think having those examples and models is really important. So in 2014, I enrolled on a professional qualification in career guidance, did that alongside my postgraduate recruitment job. And then in 2015, got a secondment to the career service, and then I never went back. So I started working with taught postgraduates to begin with. But since early 2017, I've been a postgraduate researcher careers advisor. So focusing mostly on working with PhD and other research students and early career researchers as well. So that's what I do officially.
Yeah.
I started a blog in 2021 called Post-Gradual because I was really enjoying the work. I mean, I find career guidance really fascinating, and it's got a really interesting social science theoretical background to it, which coming out of social science PhD sort of grabbed me immediately. And being able to do it with researchers specifically, I have really enjoyed finding that niche. But I was kind of wanting more, I think sometimes when you work in an institution, it can be frustrating, feeling like sometimes you're not having the impact that you could have. And I thought, well, I miss writing. I'll start a blog and I'll put some of my ideas and some of my frameworks into the ether and see if anybody else finds them useful. And it turns out they did. And I started getting invitations from that to do workshops for other types of organisations, professional bodies, other universities and things like that. So since 2021, I've also worked as a consultant doing talks, workshops and commissioned posts for other institutions and organisations as well. So I've got that side business that grew out of the blog. I never sought it out, but it just happened. I kind of put something out into the universe, and then things
Sometimes that's just the way it goes, isn't it? So it sounds that once you found yourself on this path, you've really found your niche and followed it. When you went in, you said that you did a PhD yourself. Did you have a sense of what you might do afterwards, or was it just something that kind of somebody saw something in you that maybe you didn't see in yourself?
Both, I think. Mm-hmm. I did the PhD because it came out of my master's research, and I thought, I'm not done yet. Yeah. This could go further, and I want to be the person to take it further. I definitely had some aspirations for an academic career, but my brain shoots off in a lot of different directions, and sometimes that's bad, but sometimes it's also really useful. Mm-hmm. And what I realised when I got into PhD level was there were a lot of people working in other roles in the university who seemed to be able to be doing similar things to the academics, like teaching, training, even still publishing in some cases, but were more doing it on their terms. Mm-hmm. And were working in student facing in different ways, were experts in different ways. And I was really interested in exploring that. So I think it was in the second year of my PhD where I thought, I might want to do something else here, and I'm interested in what else there is within the university environment. So I took quite a few bitty jobs. I was a student ambassador, and that introduced me to student recruitment. I got a random part-time job working on, of all things, a website for career resources for research staff, which was the first kind of career thing I did. Just anything that was in my graduate school newsletter that was like, oh, we'll pay you by the hour to do this thing, I would go for and just try it. And so whilst going into the PhD with some aspiration of potentially an academic career, what the PhD taught me was, well, what are the bits of that I actually like, which is all the student-facing stuff? What do I not like? pressure to publish, pressure to find my own funding and all of that. But what manifestations can I find of the things I do like?
Mm.
Where is that happening? Who's doing it without the pressures of the things I don't like? And that sort of emerged for me as I went through. So I'm a bit tongue in cheek when I say about my friend Simon showing me that job and saying, oh, you could do it. He did that, I think, with the knowledge that I'd spoken to him about this. I'd said, oh, I'm interested in working in a university environment, in the capacity, advising, presenting, not doing research. So he had something to go on. It wasn't completely random.
Yeah.
But I think he did see something in me as well, but it was an educated guess for him that would be something I'd be interested in. And this is why I say to people, tell people you're looking when you are job hunting. Tell people that you're looking and what you're looking for, because that automatically multiplies the number of people who are job hunting for you. And they might come across things that you don't. Yeah.
I imagine, though, that's excellent advice in and of itself. And I'm sure some of what you've just spoken about there, the experience that you went through, will be the kinds of things that you now speak to postgraduate researchers about, or it just gives you that empathy that you've been on a similar journey.
Yes. Although Careers Advisor School teaches you've got to be careful about that. You can quite often find yourself in a one-to-one consultation with a researcher who you find you have something in common with.
Mm-hmm.
And good guidance is to put that back, file that away, put the person you're talking to at the centre, because they are coming from a different place than I came from. They're also existing now, they're job hunting in a very different economic, political, social climate than I was. So you've got to be very careful not to project your own experience onto them. You've got to appreciate the differences. There's a way of balancing it. I think there's a way of balancing that I understand, I empathise, but I think that, I've been there. You've got to be careful with that, because you've been there, but you've been there with your own perspective at your own time. So I think having gone through it, having got the PhD and been through that experience, I think it gives credibility, definitely. But as a guidance practitioner, you've got to be really careful that you're meeting that person, you're meeting that researcher you're talking to where they are, and not where you were or where you expect them to be based on your own experience. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And that idea is very important, because I think in academia specifically, we've suffered a lot from careers advice that goes something like, well, if I were you, I would. Or, well, here's what worked for me. And, a lot of PhD researchers, what worked for their supervisor, what worked for their predecessors will not work for them just because of how things are now. So the impartial guidance that we offer, I think, is really important. And I think the researchers really appreciate that space.
I bet they do, because, that's certainly one thing that's a case from some of the PhD students and early career research that I've talked to, is that if all they're seeing around them day to day are other academics, then it's very hard to conceive of what else might be an option for them. Yeah.
Or if all they see around them is academics who did it a certain way, they're going to think there might not be another way to do it, or another way to manifest that, or what that could look like. So I would definitely hope that the work I do with them helps them to see more possibilities, not just beyond the academy, but potentially within it as well.
Are you listening to this podcast for career inspiration? Even though research adjacent roles are pretty niche, there are still so many different paths that you could take. For a bit of a nudge in the right direction, try the Research Adjacent Careers quiz at researchadjacent.com/quiz. Based on your strengths and interests, it will suggest a job category to explore further with some recommendations for podcast episodes from the Research Adjacent back catalogue to give you some more inspiration. Complete the quiz at researchadjacent.com or click the link in the show notes.
Jack Grove put out an article in the Times Higher. It was 2 weeks ago now, saying what a shortage there is of career guidance professionals who specialise in working with PhDs. And I read Jack's article and it was like, thank you. Because he was talking about a report that Robin Mellors-Bourne has published recently, which is excellent because the focus of that has shifted. The focus, whenever, it felt like there were a few years where we went through the reviews of doctoral education from a couple of the research councils and from UKRI, and the discourse tended to be there's not enough support, not enough career guidance for PhDs. There needs to be more, do it better. And we were, myself and my colleagues are plugging away saying we're doing what we can with the resource we can, with the funding we can in the time that we have. But Jack's article that references Robin's report shifts that discourse a little bit and says it's happening, but the people who are doing it are stretched. And these jobs are needed, but it's difficult to recruit to them. So, kind of starting to shift that narrative, not saying there's not enough career support for PhDs, but saying there's a shortage of people there's a shortage of roles or a shortage of people to do those roles, which is a slight shift, but it feels a bit more, I don't know, it's a bit less defeating. So yeah, I think there is, and I'm so much has come out recently, say the reviews of doctoral education from some research councils, UKRI statement of expectations for doctoral training, New Deal for postgraduate researchers from UKRI. And in all of these things, you will see making postgraduate researchers aware of their career options, aware of the skills they need for those options is a priority. And so it is interesting and quite energising at the minute to sort of be in the centre of that.
Yeah, I imagine.
And I think it's definitely come to the fore over the past few years.
Yeah, well, we'll have to get a link to that article then, and we can put it in the show notes. But as you say, you do seem to have found yourself in a position where the sorts of things that you're writing about are getting attention, and they're the kinds of things people want to hear about, they want to read about, to the extent that you're going to be putting together a book.
That's right. Yeah. Which I love, because I think a lot of people who do a PhD think that turning your PhD into a thesis is the only chance you'll ever have to write a book. And if you don't do that, you've missed the boat. Well, you absolutely haven't. But yeah, that's right. Over the past 7 or 8 years, I've kind of surveyed the landscape, and there are quite a lot of voices in North America that have been talking about these issues around career options, broader career thinking for researchers, and the people in mainland Europe as well. But I'd noticed, there's lots of great resources from people who are based in the UK, but what I noticed was there wasn't a book, like a sort of practical handbook type volume that was written both by a trained careers advisor, which comes back to not that N=1 advice of here's how I did it, here's how you should do it. But who was also writing for an audience of researchers from all subject areas. There are some brilliant volumes by, people like Sarah Blackford, for example, focusing on life sciences. There are a few other good ones as well, focusing on specific subject areas. But I think my centre of my Venn diagram was that I had a PhD, I was a trained careers advisor, and I was writing for all subject areas. And there wasn't, and I had a UK focus as well. And that was how I got the pitch. That was the pitch I made for the book, which is Navigating Careers Beyond Academia, a practical handbook for doctoral and postdoctoral researchers. The book contracts with Routledge. And my manuscript deadline is Halloween next year.
Oh.
I deliberately chose the scariest day of the year.
I was going to say, did you get a choice in that?
I did. I chose it myself. It's because I'll not forget it. What's the scariest day of the year? That's my deadline. Basically, and it's really exciting because, to go back to what I said about starting the blog out of the motivation of having a wider impact for more people, being able to formalize some of the exercises and the frameworks that I've come up with in my practice and put them into something official feels really nice and really tangible.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Maybe we're still going then, maybe we'll have to have you back to hear about it once it's out in the world. So maybe, that leads us on to, I don't know how it might relate, but to ask you about some of the things you've done in your career that you're really proud of. I don't know if maybe it touches on some of the things you've already mentioned.
Because I thought about this question. I know you usually ask people, and there are two sides of it to me. I think professionally, the book is right up there because, I, as I say, a lot of people who come from an academic or research background, you think your thesis is your one shot at that. And if you don't publish that and then you move away and you do something else, you might not get the chance again. But that's absolutely not the case. So I'm proud of the fact that I have kind of come out of my original academic subject area, found something that I'm just as, if not more, interested in, and that I've kind of applied my researcher brain to it. To get the book contract, which is brilliant. Yeah. But there's definitely a personal aspect as well that I'm proud of. So I've talked about this a little bit in my blog, but not in a lot of detail. But so 16th of June, I think it was 2020. It was a Wednesday, whatever day it was. Wednesday, mid-June 2020. I woke up one morning and I couldn't see properly out of one eye. And I thought, it's grit or something, and just carried on blinking all the way through the day. Anyway, what turned out happening was that I was diagnosed with a very rare eye condition. We don't know definitely what causes it. It's called Azor. But what we think happens is that the immune system attacks the photoreceptors in the retina, and the effects of that can be temporary or it can be permanent visual loss. So I have lost about a third of the visual field in my left eye, and I have other aberrations like flashing lights, what we call photopsia, and some other interference. Looking at bright things is very difficult. And as somebody who'd always had perfect eyesight, this was really difficult to get my head round. And I think one of the things that I'm proudest of is adjusting to that, being able to stay working full time, and not using it as a force to say I can't do things. But I think what it's given me is a force to say, let's do this while I still can.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what will happen with it.
So is it something that can get progressively worse over time, or is it a bit unpredictable?
It's a bit unpredictable, but we think it is affected by a viral infection. So if I contract a viral infection, then I tend to get something will happen, and that's when the lesions happen. And then it takes a while to know whether that lesion is permanent or whether it or whether it self-resolves. But we don't know. It's not progressive, which means it doesn't kind of slowly get worse over time. It's an acute condition. But I might have other attacks of it. I may not. If I do, we don't know when they'll be. So you have to get quite good at living with uncertainty. Yeah. And I think what I've developed is, which is useful most of the time, not so useful when I have to do any long-term planning, but I try as much as I can not to think past the day I'm in. If that makes sense. I wake up in the morning, I think, today's not the day I go blind. Brilliant, let's do this day. Let's do all the things we're going to do in this day. Which I think sounds odd to some people, but that's how I've coped with it.
I think it's something that's probably very good for your mental health. You know, just to take it one day at a time and not think too far ahead, and also not to think backwards as well, because you can get bogged down in like, why did it happen? Why me? You know, all that sort of thing. So it does sound a very positive way to approach it, but it does also, as you say, it must make it hard to think sometimes about longer term projects, like your book, for example.
Exactly. There's a new kind of anxiety that comes with something that I'm committing to a year in the future. But what I found also helps is just being open and authentic with people about it. So with my editors, I've explained to them the situation. This is why it's a real interest of mine is supporting students and researchers to talk about health conditions and disabilities with potential employers. And when I do it, I call it bringing them onto Planet Holly before they meet me or before we commit to anything, so that they understand the parameters I'm working with, and how within those parameters I can work with them and they can work with me. So, yeah. But so I think adapting to that, I've still been able to do all the things that I've been able to do, and still committing to things. I'm proud that I've been able to do that, and that it hasn't stopped me saying yes.
Yeah, well, like I say, that just sounds like a very positive attitude, because I'm sure that when you're saying as well now that you're in that position to speak to students and postdocs about having those conversations themselves as well, because that's the kind of thing that people really worry about, isn't it? It's, you know, who's going to want me if I can't do X, Y, Z? Yeah.
Mm-mm. It's feeling like a liability.
Yeah.
It's how it can feel. But showing how you've overcome it, adapted to it, manage it, I honestly believe far outweighs any liability you feel you are. It's just having the belief and the confidence in that. Yeah. I've had some brilliant examples of PhD researchers using health conditions, how they've managed those, how they've recruited their own carers and things like that. Actually using those on their CV and on applications.
It demonstrates incredible skill and resilience and all those sorts of things that employers are looking for, doesn't it?
I think so. Getting people to believe that, you know, is a step. But yeah, I think if you've got a disability or a long-term health condition, I think what you have to be really good at doing is you have to be really good at understanding your boundaries, and understanding what you need and being able to ask for it, which I think in a relationship with a line manager is actually a really useful thing to be able to do, because I think line managers will find you more self-aware than potentially employees who don't have those challenges, because you've had to understand yourself, you've had to understand the impact on you, and you've had to understand what you need to perform at your best. And other people don't always know that. So yeah, obviously I strongly believe in those benefits of it for you in the workplace. But working with researchers to understand and believe that there is a bit of work that needs to be done there.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine that it's not, as I say, I think your attitude when you said that some people find it surprising, I think it's probably fairly unusual as well, that, the way that you've coped with it. But yeah, fantastic that there is that, you can use that experience to help others as well. Yeah. So, as I think I do like to ask my guests, if they had a magic wand, what would they do with their magic wand in the world that they live in? The world that they inhabit.
If I was the PhD careers fairy godmother, there'd be a lot of glitter involved. A lot. No, I love this question. I do have an answer for it. So if I was PhD careers fairy godmother for a day and I had a magic wand, I would use it to invent a new language for talking about careers that doesn't involve the in academia and out of academia dichotomy.
Yes, please.
because I have wrestled with this. All of the language we have at the moment for talking to researchers about options and paths is, we've got non-academic, alternative, outside, even adjacent.
Yeah.
And there's two issues for me with that. One of them is that it situates everything as if academia is somehow at the centre.
Yeah.
And that everything else is defined by its proximity to or its distance from academia, which doesn't really sit well with me. But also I think it bolsters that idea that you either have to totally stay or totally leave, and that there are not variations on that. And that's why in my book, what I've tried to do is, there's got to be case studies in there from real PhD graduates and former postdocs. And I've tried to get as much as I can, as many different ways that people are combining, contributing to academia and contributing to research or higher education, but also applying their skills beyond. They're not doing one or the other. They forged this career where they're doing both.
Yeah.
Because it is a false dichotomy. So if I could wave my magic wand and solve something, it would be that.
It's definitely something that's needed. Definitely something needed. As you know, the whole premise behind this podcast is about how we talk about these roles and where they sit in relation to research. Another thing, I'd love it if you could solve with your magic wand as well, is I really hate when people talk about hard skills and soft skills. That drives me up the wall as well. So if we could sort that at the same time, that would be an amazing wave of the magic wand. So
brilliant.
I think definitely granted for that one. Yeah. Fantastic. We need to start thinking about wrapping up our conversation. It's gone really quickly. Whereabouts can people find you, find the blog that you've mentioned, all those sorts of things? Yeah,
sure. You can find me where I usually hang out on LinkedIn, Holly Prescott. I'm there. My blog is called Post-Gradual. It's a PhD careers blog. You can find it at phd-careers.co.uk. And you know what I've done this week as well? I joined Blue Sky. I'm Holby83, so HOLBY 83 on there, which I think I'm going to now use as my second social media platform after LinkedIn. Yeah, those are the places where I am.
Well, we'll get the links to all of those and put them on the show notes. Yeah, I'm also dipping my toe in blue sky, but not quite sure just yet, but we shall see how it goes. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming along, sharing your story, and telling us about the book and everything. So we'll look forward to that coming out. But for now, thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links in the episode description to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and the theme music is by Lemon Music Studios on Pixabay. And you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.